The surefire way to lose a lot of money on flips is potentially to be doing too many at once, but there's going to be a solution for that. So today we're going to talk a little bit about the dangers and opportunities of maybe scaling too fast or scaling recklessly by not just doing one, but thinking you can do 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 all at one time. People ask me all the time, like some people are looking for opportunities and they're like, hey Matt, do you have any loans in default, any opportunities, any loans we can buy from you or whatever? And then, got me thinking, well, what are the common reasons for deals to go south? And it can be a number of answers. A lot of times people ask me, do you have more problems with your first time inexperienced flippers or maybe your experienced flippers? And obviously a first time flipper, they're going to have struggles because anything you've never done before, it's always going to be a new process. And, they may struggle in raising the money or finding the right subs and contractors, or just simply thinking through logistically because they've never done it before, the order that you need to go in to get the remodel done. And so you can be as efficient and, keep your timeline. But what I see is actually probably my bigger issues is with experienced or really experienced, or people that have done a few flips, or people that have done a lot of flips, but they decide that, 2 is better than 1, or 3 is better than 1, or 4 is better than 2, or 5 is better than 3, which in theory it is, assuming that all of them pencil and look like they're going to, be profitable. But there is a complexity if you're not ready for it when you're doing more than one at a time, that it actually compounds your problems and you're better off just doing one or none, because your projects are going to be so out of control, your timelines are going to be messed up, you're going to be stalled and delayed on projects, and you would have been better off just not doing any. The first time flippers, if you're just doing one at a time, yes, there's going to be issues there. And so to talk about this issue, we're going to bring in my reliable and awesome contractor, Esteban from Momentum Construction.
Right on. Thanks, man.
So we're going to talk here in a minute with how we as a team have mitigated doing multiple at a time. And you've worked with a lot of other flippers and rehabbers, and where the blind spots that they don't see and the reasons why they don't see them, and how we can have a solution for it. So the first thing though that I want to talk about before we jump into that is just the realities of there's 3 parts to this, I think. I mean, there's potentially way more than 3, but one is not just like if you're on one single flip, but if you're doing multiple ones, you've got to have a way more detailed vision and timeline, not just thinking about the one, but thinking about all of them together, and the timetable, the flow, the chart, when you're going to need different subs for what. So like thinking with the end in mind, not just about one, but like all of them, and just thinking through, like, do you have all the resources needed? Not just in terms of like your own bandwidth and brain power, but also in terms of your contractors, your subs. But then, you got to make sure you have the money for all of this. I see it countless times where people get so excited, they find so many deals. Maybe they can line up the hard money or the purchase funds. They even have to get it to 100% so they can buy the property, but they're not thinking through properly that they're going to need 5 times the number of rehab money. And a lot of times they're thinking, well, when this one sells, I'll have enough money to then start this one. And it's kind of like a never-ending game of borrowing from Peter to pay Paul. And then what that happens is if they actually don't have enough money to do all the budgets and the rehab, they end up stalling out, even though they maybe otherwise would have the crews and the contractors to finish them, but they don't have the money. So the whole goal of today is to provide some tips on not only to have the money, but then also to have the crews and the vision so that you really can scale and do more than one at a time. There's a reason that these, say a builder that's building hundreds of homes a year, there's a reason they have a huge team, because it is not easy to have, a process and the resources to finish all of them. So let's actually jump straight into talking about the logistics of doing multiple at a time. Let's start with what are some of the common mistakes you see, either as we've done flips or you see from other people when they're doing more than one at a time, from just the logistics getting the rehabs done?
Sure. So the first one that I see is that then they try to do multiple at a time with the same crew at the same time. So basically, you cannot split someone in half to take them from project A to project B. So one of the first mistakes is not having enough people or enough subcontractors to work with along different projects, because one crew can only focus on one project at the same time.
Yeah. And I've seen it where you do think sometimes, well, I'll just take them and then they maybe can start on this house in the morning and then I'll have them go to this other house in the afternoon, because you want to feel like you're getting stuff done. But it's so true. It's like, think about any project you're doing. If you're distracted, you're not going to do that same task as well versus just getting it done, finishing it, and then moving on to the next one. And it's really hard to stagger them where you say, okay, I'm only going to buy one every month, because sometimes you get more deals at one time and then you buy like 3 in a week. And so it's not like you can have, at some point you're going to have a house sitting unless you have multiple, I guess, teams or multiple subcontractors that can work separately in different houses doing this. They're, the same function like electrical. You're going to need to have multiple
subcontractors for that. Yeah. So basically, if your business model is to have like just one crew of 2 or 3 guys, you're gonna make sure to keep them busy along the way. But in order to scale into a more volume, then you will have to have different trades or subcontractors for each thing, so they can only focus on just one thing at a time on every house.
Yeah, and the advantage if you're doing multiple properties to have like say one project manager or contractor that can oversee it is that contractor is not actually going to be doing like swinging the hammer or running the electrical. They're going to be kind of quarterbacking or the head coach that can kind of manage all the different teams. And then the real skill is having a big enough list of reliable subcontractors so that once the plan is in place, and then we're going to come back to that about how to, just a refresher, we've done multiple videos on this about having a vision and a plan for each house, but then having enough teams in place that you really can have 4 or 5 or 6 going at a time, because you have 4 or 5 or 6 sets of subs.
Correct. Yeah.
That is true. And it will work out where every once in a while you'll be able to, like the window guy or whatever, like maybe speak to some of the trades that really can handle maybe say 5 or 6 flips at a time, and the trades that maybe can't. So I'm thinking like roofers, window guys, they just need to come out and measure and order and schedule the installs. But like say an electrician, the same electrician can't work on 6 houses at the same time.
Correct, unless you start getting to a point where you're hiring, again, like a different subcontractors with a bigger infrastructure where they have different employees or like a larger team. But at that point, it starts not to be cost effective, because the bigger the subcontractor or the more infrastructure that he has, the more overhead that he has, and the more money he will cost.
Yep. So that is a fine line that we dance here when we're flipping these properties, that we're not, you don't have the budget. It's not like a huge budget where you can't, because that's a good point. You could hire a really professional, huge company like a big electrical company, but they're just going to be more expensive.
Correct.
They'd be able to satisfy and handle all of it. So you've got to network like crazy to find the biggest bang for your buck. The smaller operators that really only have the ability to do maybe one project at a time,
or 1 or 2 at the most.
You need to find like 2 or 3 of those guys.
Correct. Yeah. And then at that point, you can line them up to every project that you have. And then you have a schedule for them. They feel a little bit of a security with you because you will have the next house for them. And that will work out because they will put you as a priority as well.
So what are some, just to recap, we kind of mentioned it, but what are some of the trades where you can kind of rely on one guy or one outfit? Like we're usually, even if we're doing 5 or 6 at a time, we're usually always using the same window guy.
Correct.
The same roofer.
Yep.
We have 2 or 3 HVAC guys because sometimes those can take longer. Like say you're doing things like sewer or kind of one-off things, you can like foundation stuff, you can generally stick with a reliable one shop that can handle, because the window guy just needs to go measure, and then he usually has install crews that can handle different projects.
Yeah, it's usually the crews that take longer than a week
Yeah.
to finish the job. A window subcontractor can come in 1 or probably at the most 2 days. But your electrician, your framer, plumber, drywaller,
Yep.
painter,
Yep.
then at that point you start getting longer timelines for the job.
And then the handyman, the like debris cleanup, cleaners, you can get away with the same cleaner.
With the same cleanup,
yeah, because they're not going to be at every house every day. They're just going to be there at the end.
Mhm.
So think about that when you're thinking about doing multiple ones.
Mhm.
I've always give this analogy because it just makes more sense to me. Like think of a football, a basketball, a soccer team. You need to have a lot of depth, right? You need to have a starter, you need to have backups. This whole thing of real estate comes down to networking, from finding deals to financing to raising money. But specifically for this topic,
Mhm.
you need to network and have a really, really good depth of crews for all these different subs.
Correct. Yeah. And then if you're gonna go with, let's say, I'm just gonna have one crew and increase my volume over time, then you just need to find like a second crew and make sure that you have enough houses for them, because if not, then they will go with somebody else.
Yeah, and I do think
It's
does
a
not
balance.
hurt to just be very direct and transparent with
Mhm.
people and say, listen, I need you on this project, or I'd like to hire you on this project. Even if you can't commit that they'll have multiple ones, but if they know, you don't want to leave people along. If they think you're going to keep them busy forever,
Yeah, that's not
like maybe your A
that's not
team
good.
you do, but on those backups, you got to be a little
Yeah.
strategic, and you may have to pay a little bit more for maybe the backup
Mhm.
or the secondary backup,
Yeah.
or you've got to be willing to deal with, they're not in your ecosystem and they don't know your process as well. So they might be a better price, but they may just take longer.
Correct.
You
Yeah,
know?
that is.
So it's really hard, but you got
It's
to
a balance.
factor all of that in. So, but to have that be successful, let's go back to where we got a plan up front,
Mhm.
right? So if you're going to be doing multiple, you got to like have a bigger vision of, okay, how does this house fit amongst all the other houses I'm doing? Which that's where it can be logistically really challenging. So what are some best practices that we found in doing that?
Yeah, the ideal thing is to have like either a Gantt chart or a schedule. And I know it sounds overly simplistic, but it's so important to have it. And in a way where you know when every subcontractor will come in. Again, like if this sounds super simplistic, you don't want to have the dry water before the electrician comes in. So you gotta have them scheduled in advance as much as possible, and things happen.
But not only do you, so basically you got to like take each house and do all that prep and planning ahead of time, and then overlay it almost with all the other ones that you're doing.
Correct.
So you have a better chance to know when you're going to need what team and who you need to backfill or use for those other houses.
And do not commit to having the electrician on two houses at the same time.
Yep.
That is like one of the big mistakes, and I usually see is when either myself or somebody else try to have the same electrician on two houses the same day.
Yep.
Because it loses momentum. It creates distractions. They don't remember what they did in the other houses, so they start getting confused in that point.
And the complexity of each house, like if you're doing 5 or 6 like super high-end remodels that are like, $150,000 to $250,000 budgets. I've seen this recently with a borrower where he's been trying to just do it himself and like use his same kind of crew for each house. And he would put out a house really well, really quick when he was just doing one at a time. Then he got like 4 or 5. And I mean, this is the poster example of like how to screw it up, because he had the hesitancy, or he hadn't ever built out a big enough team because it was just him and his crews. So he thought he could handle 4 or 5 at a time with the same crew and vendors that he was doing for one. And what ended up happening is he got like halfway done on all of them in a time that took way longer than if he would have just almost done one at a time, then let the other house sit, go to the next one. I mean, it still isn't a good strategy, but it's like credit card debt. You're better off paying one card first and then paying off the other card. But better yet, you're better at just only doing one if that's going to be your strategy.
If that's going to be the business model, then you go to, right? And then the hard part is when inspector comes, or you got to do inspections if you're going to sell the house at the very end. then you have to pull your crew to fix those things.
Yeah.
And then you have a gap now.
Yep.
And everything keeps delaying.
Yeah, I would say do not do more than one or two if your model is to just either do it all yourself or have the same set of guys that would go from one to the other, because you're going to get backed up. Your houses are going to sit on the market too long. You're going to be tempted to pull them off to go solve a problem on this one. And there's always going to be a little bit of that. But if you're going to be doing multiple, I really think you need one. You can't be doing any of it yourself, or you've got to be very disciplined and have everything mapped out. You're going to have help. Basically, the point is, if you're just doing one at a time, you don't really need a team. But if you're going to be doing multiples, you need to have a team. And part of that team is either hiring a contractor that can then have, the reliability to basically oversee all of them. That's going to mean it's going to be an increased cost to your budget, no doubt about it. But if you've got the right team, you can move as quick on 5 as you would move on 1.
Correct. And then the increase in cost, or the dichotomy, is that sometimes we think, oh yeah, I'm going to pay more to the general contractor, but then I'm going to do it myself, but then I'm going to take however many months of interest, and I'm going to start even paying even more.
Yeah, there's a trade-off. So you've got to be conscious of all the realities, because the reality is it will cost more with the contractor. So then once you understand this and think a bigger picture, you will then make different choices on when you buy, because you'll either pass on some because the margins just aren't as big, or you're going to attempt, I know it's always hard to negotiate a better deal to account for the fact that your remodel budget's going to be a little bit more. But money loves speed. We've talked about that. So the quicker you can go for the same quality, you're going to save money on interest. You're going to save money on time. You're going to reduce time on the market or exposure from having the house not completed as quickly as otherwise you could have.
That's right. That is correct.
So to kind of summarize these first 2 points is start with the end in mind, not just on each individual house like we've talked about before. Present that vision for what that house is going to look like. Be very detailed up front. Where are you getting all of your supplies? Who is going to be your team on this house? And then basically you have to copy and paste it however many times you're doing for the house, and then overlay all of those to kind of account for all the ones that you're doing.
See where every piece will ideally fall into place. I would say that, but then be flexible on things too, right? Like determine and never stop networking. Contractors always love to give away referrals for their friends.
Yep.
So if you have a good, reliable contractor, they're going to give you a good referral for something that you may need in the future too.
And what goes without saying, once you have a good team, don't jerk them around and not pay them. Don't, be very clear. You'll have to refer back to a couple of the other videos we've done about that remodel process. When the subcontractors get in there, it's very clear that they're supposed to be there. They can do the work. They know exactly what they're supposed to do, because you want to make their life easier so that they can move on quickly, to your next project. But where you will fail for sure is if, going back to if you are involved, you're there swinging the hammer, you're there picking up materials, you're there and you're trying to do 4 or 5 of those, you can only do so much.
Correct.
And I think back to a few years ago when me and my partner, we didn't have a contractor. We were just really trying to manage 2 or 3 2-man crews. And we were doing 60 houses that year. We lost money on so many houses because we didn't have the vision of how to do them all together. We were always trying to do 3 houses at the same time with the same crew. So all the houses it wasn't like they took twice as long. They took 3 or 4 times as long because, one human can only do so much.
Correct.
Thankfully, we never really had the problem of being undercapitalized because we had really good lenders that would help us with, the rehab money. But that's a reality. And then, so that is kind of the third point, is make sure you have the money for each project. So just like you're mapping out, okay, this crew's doing this house, then this crew's doing this house, but some of those other vendors that can do all of them, like the window guy, he's going to come. You have a plan for each house, but then you have an aggregate plan that can kind of incorporate all of them based off of, your game plan. But if you don't have the money, you're going to get stuck. Even if you have all the crews, but then if you can't pay your people,
correct,
that is naturally going to stall out.
It's going to.
How many times have you had that conversation where you're like, I got to stop working on
I got to stop. I want to say in the last 2 or 3 years, I have to have it like 5 times. I want
Yeah.
to say on it, where yeah, you can only get so far away, right? Because the subcontractors are going to start asking for money, and I've seen where you don't pay the subcontractor, you just like you said, just jerking around, and then when they go back to the house and they cut wires, they don't, they make a mess, they
Yeah,
style
that's
it.
true. I
Yeah,
thought about
that's
that, but I've
worse.
seen that happen all the time where
Yeah.
a sub gets burned
Mm.
and then they want retaliation. So we've seen it where they've
We've
gone
seen
in and
that.
pulled out what they put in, or they've
Mhm.
gone in and sabotaged the house, and
Yeah.
cut the wires. Now this is, if you're starting out, it's so tempting because you want to get to the finish line so much faster, meaning if you just did a flip and you made 50 grand and you're like, well, gosh, I'm going to do 6 of these
Yeah.
now because I want to make, $300,000. In theory, that sounds great. But if you're not prepared, trust me, you will go backwards. And if anyone can show me how to do it otherwise, I would love to learn, because I'm always open to seeing a different
Yeah.
way. But the money part's hard, and the money part's always going to be hard. You're always going to be looking for more money. But if you just know ahead of time, I'm going to probably need way more than I thought, and you're intentionally raising it, ideally at the time. I mean, in a perfect world, every time you close on a flip, you have in your account enough money without relying on another deal to close for that flip to get completed.
Yeah.
Because when you have that and you have a clear picture of how you're going to solve the problem of doing all these at a time with a contractor or whatever, you have confidence and you have clarity on what you're doing. And then what that allows you to do is just be more successful. If you're always confused about who's going to go to what house next, where am I going to get the money to finish this? I've already bought all these. You're confused, you're anxious, you're stressed. And then what's going to happen? You're going to fail.
Yeah, like one of the biggest pitfalls is like you want to grow too fast, too quick.
Yep.
Too much, too quick, I mean. And that is just going to get you to you're going to start, just like you said, like robbing Peter to pay Paul, dealing with one subcontractor, not being able to hire them, then invest the time to go and find another one, and then burning relationships. So that's just not good.
Yep. And then, anything in life or in business, you're always going to have a challenge, and then
of course.
The other problem that would be the best problem to have is you've figured out how to do all this, you know how to have all the money for it, but then you're going to have the problem of, maybe now we don't have the inventory to keep the whole machine going.
Yep.
But that would ultimately be the best problem to have, because then it just comes back to deal finding, which is sometimes hard in any market, but that's going to be a better problem to have than the other advantage we've had is by building out this system where we get pretty good, and maybe I don't have as many flips going on as we would like, but you've built up the capacity to do more. We've been able to come in and help borrowers finish houses, which we're doing right now.
Correct, yeah.
And kind of, I guess, save the day, or it helps me out because the property that I have the loan on gets done, So
it's always to have those relationships. That's when I can come in and just finish the project at the end of the day. Like everybody at least gets the project done, because that's the most important thing. Like a halfway project doesn't do any good to anybody.
Right. Yeah, I don't know. Like maybe another analogy. I was watching my kid weed our yard, right? And so if you organize and you think about okay, I got this whole backyard to weed, you got a planter box here. I noticed he would kind of do a couple weeds here, and then he'd get bored or something and then go to the other section and weed a couple here, but then he'd go back instead of just methodically going, along the fence here, along the fence there, along the fence here. You kind of naturally have this tendency of if I just jump over here and do these other sections, somehow I'll get done quicker.
You feel the progress, you feel the fake progress on it.
Yeah, the fake progress. That's a really good word. Yeah. So be methodical. I guess we're going to recap here. So be methodical and build out an awesome team of either one contractor that then he has the skills to build out multiple layers of subs so that you can really handle. Definitely you're going to want multiple backups for electrical mechanical, plumbing. And then if you get a reliable sub that can handle just windows, roofs, those kind of one-time items where they just kind of come in after the prep of ordering it all and knock it out, and then be very, very cautious if you're just still going, nope, I am going to do it myself. and I'm going to do it with my regular guys, that's awesome, but you might be limited in being able to do more than once. Be very intentional about setting out that vision for not just one house, but for all of them, and then wrapping it all in. This all needs to get paid for. So be very mindful and raise as much money as you can up front. Do not rely on one deal paying off later that will fund this deal. Make sure you allocate your resources both from a human standpoint and from a financial standpoint, and then you will have success flipping multiple properties at once.
Yeah, and then just one last thought on it. Like whenever you're dealing with multiple properties, it's easy to get lost on the receipts, the money. So don't forget about also hiring a bookkeeper, bookkeeper that can keep you in track to know how much you spend on every house. Because that can get really messy really fast.
And then all of that, then you have all these houses up for sale. You clearly have to have an amazing sales team and a process for selling them, working with title. You got to map all these out. And I'm still learning this and learned it way too late. You really got to have a system and a process that's documented, that people can follow, that aren't you. Because in order for you to be successful to do more than just one at a time, you've got to get to a point where you can basically hire out and have everybody follow your system and process. Otherwise, you are going to be weeding multiple different areas of the same yard and just going in circles.
Never ending on it. So great, man.
All right, so be intentional, have the money, have the vision, and execute.